You don't overthink because something is wrong with you. You overthink because your brain made a deal a long time ago that thinking meant safety, and it kept that promise, even when the danger was gone. You don't overthink because you're intelligent. You overthink because your brain believes thinking equals safety. And somewhere along the way, maybe in childhood, maybe after a relationship that blindsided you, maybe after a moment you never saw coming, you learned something. You learned that if you just analyze enough, if you just prepare enough, if you just think through every possible outcome before it happens, you won't get hurt. And for a while, maybe that worked, or at least it felt like it did. But that strategy, the one that was supposed to protect you, it's exhausting you. Let's start here, because this is important. Overthinking doesn't feel like a problem when you're in it. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like due diligence, like you're doing the work that other people are too careless to do. When you're lying awake at 2 a.m., running through a conversation you had 3 days ago, it doesn't feel like suffering. It feels like solving. When you're mentally rehearsing everything that could go wrong before a difficult conversation, it doesn't feel like anxiety. It feels like preparation. That's the trap. Because overthinking wears the costume of conscientiousness. But psychologically, and this is where it gets important, overthinking is often not a personality trait. It's not a quirk. It's not just how you're wired. For many people, it's a trauma response. Think about what happens to a child who grows up in an unpredictable environment. Maybe there was instability at home. Maybe a parent's moods were impossible to read. Maybe conflict came out of nowhere. Maybe love felt conditional, available one day, withdrawn the next. That child's brain had to adapt. It learned, scan everything, watch for shifts, predict what's coming. Because if you can see it before it arrives, you can prepare. And if you can prepare, you can survive. That was a brilliant adaptation. In that environment, hypervigilance was intelligent. It was protective. But here's what no one tells you. Your nervous system doesn't automatically update when the environment changes. You grew up. The chaos ended, or at least changed. But your brain kept the same operating system. So now, even in safe situations, even in relationships where no threat exists, even in decisions that carry no real danger, your mind doesn't rest. It patrols, because that's what it learned to do. Let me walk you through what's actually happening inside your brain when you overthink. Because once you see the mechanism clearly, it starts to lose some of its power over you. It goes like this. A small uncertainty appears. Maybe it's a text that came in with a slightly different tone. Maybe it's a look someone gave you. Maybe it's a decision you need to make with incomplete information. Your brain scans it. And because your nervous system has been trained to treat uncertainty as a potential threat, it labels it unknown, could be dangerous. So you do what brains do with danger. You begin to mentally rehearse outcomes. You run through scenarios. What if this means that? What if I do this and it leads to that? What if the worst case actually happens? You're searching for certainty, You're trying to think your way to a guaranteed safe outcome. But here's the problem. Certainty doesn't come. Because it can't. The future isn't accessible through thinking. It's genuinely unknown. So your anxiety increases. And when anxiety increases, the brain's threat response intensifies, which means it searches harder for the answer that will make the discomfort go away. So you think more, which produces more uncertainty, not less. Because the more you examine a thing, the more angles you find, the more possible outcomes emerge, the more the ground shifts beneath you, and the cycle feeds itself. Here's the thing that's critical to understand. You are not solving a problem when you do this. You are not being strategic or thorough. You are trying to eliminate uncertainty, and that's a battle you will never win. Not because you're not smart enough, but because uncertainty is not a problem with a solution. Uncertainty is simply part of being alive. Every person who has ever lived has had to move forward without knowing what comes next. The question isn't how to get rid of that feeling. The question is how to stop being controlled by it. Here's where it gets even more complicated. After years of operating this way, after years of your mind running its patrol route, scanning and analyzing and bracing, overthinking stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. You say it yourself. You've probably said it to someone recently. I'm just an overthinker. You say it with a shrug, maybe even a small, tired laugh. And I want to gently push back on that, not to dismiss what you're experiencing, because it's real, and it's exhausting, and it's not your fault that you developed this pattern. But there is a difference, a meaningful, important difference, between saying, I'm an overthinker, and saying, I'm a person who learned to use vigilance as a survival strategy. One is a fixed identity. The other is a learned behavior. And that distinction matters enormously, because identity forecloses choice. When something is who you are, there's no exit. There's no intervention point. There's just, this is me, and this is how I'll always be. But if it's something you learned, that means it was acquired. And if it was acquired, it can, with time and practice and patience, be unlearned. You are not broken. You are not permanently wired for suffering. You are someone who developed a coping mechanism that once served a purpose and has now outlasted its usefulness. That's different, and it matters. So let's talk about what actually works, because this is where a lot of advice gets it wrong. You do not stop overthinking by thinking differently. That sounds almost too simple, but sit with it for a second. Most advice around overthinking tells you to challenge your thoughts, replace the negative ones, reframe the catastrophic ones, think more rationally. And while cognitive tools have their place, what they're all missing is this. Overthinking is not a thinking problem. It's a tolerance problem. Specifically, it's an inability to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort without immediately trying to resolve them mentally. So the real work, the uncomfortable, unglamorous, profoundly effective work, is learning to sit with not knowing, to feel the discomfort of an unresolved question, and not immediately reach for the mental spiral that promises relief, but never delivers it. That is the muscle you need to build. And like any muscle, it's built through repetition, through doing the hard thing over and over until it stops feeling impossible. Here's what that looks like in practice. The next time you feel the pull, the familiar tug toward the spiral, pause before you follow it, not to suppress the thought, not to force positivity, just pause. Create a small gap between the urge and the action. And in that gap, ask yourself one question. Is this thought actually solving something right now? Not eventually, not hypothetically, right now. If the answer is yes, if there's a concrete action available, a real decision to make, then think. By all means, use your mind. That's what it's there for. But if the answer is no, if you're spinning on something you cannot currently control or resolve, then practice the hardest thing. Let it remain unsolved. Feel the discomfort of that. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice the urge to chase it, to fix it, to make it stop. And then don't. Not because the discomfort doesn't matter, but because you need to prove to your nervous system through experience what your thinking alone can't convince it of. That discomfort is not danger. The feeling of not knowing is uncomfortable. It is not lethal. It will not destroy you. And every time you sit with it, even for 30 seconds longer than you usually would, you are rewiring the association your brain made so long ago between uncertainty and threat. This is not a quick process. It doesn't happen in a week, but it is real, and it is available to you. The other thing worth knowing, your body is often the fastest route out of the loop, not your mind. When the spiral starts, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply change your physical state. Stand up, step outside, breathe slowly and deliberately, not as a trick, but as a genuine signal to your nervous system that you are not, in fact, in danger. Because the overthinking loop is a physiological state as much as it is a mental one, and you have more access to your body than you think. Here's what I want you to hold on to as you walk away from this. Overthinking once protected you. Whatever environment taught your brain to scan and predict, embrace, it was responding intelligently to real conditions. There's no shame in that. There never was. But what was once protection has become a prison. And you don't have to stay in it. You don't need to predict life in order to survive it. You don't need to have every answer before you take a step. You don't need to eliminate uncertainty before you're allowed to feel okay. You need to trust yourself, not to prevent everything from going wrong, but to handle whatever comes, to respond, to recover, to keep moving. That trust isn't built by thinking more. It's built by acting and surviving and slowly accumulating evidence that you are more capable of navigating the unknown than your nervous system currently believes. The pattern you've been living inside, it made sense once. You can honor that and still choose to move beyond it. Because now you can see it, you can name it, you know what's happening when the spiral starts. And that awareness, that small but real gap between the urge and the action, that's where everything changes. That's where freedom begins.